All right, so guys, I'm going to show you a series of images, and you need to tell me at the end what they all have in common. Okay? So here's your first image. Second one. Third one. Fourth one. Fifth one. Sixth one. Seventh one. Eighth one. What do these all have in common? Pierre had to stand up first. Okay, they can't produce their own food, so they're all heterotrophs. Good. They're all animals. Good job. That's it. No. All right. So, how many of you know the difference between a vertebrate and an invertebrate? All right, Leo, what is it? Okay, which one has a spine? Okay, but a vertebrate or an invertebrate, which one has a spine? Vertebrate has a spine and invertebrates do not. Okay, so here's your definitions. If you need them, you can write them down, but if you already know it, then you don't need it. Okay, so vertebrates have a backbone. Invertebrates do not have a backbone. Here's your fun fact of the day. Over 97% of the animals on Earth are invertebrates, do not have a backbone. Only about 3% are vertebrates. But if I were to ask you to think of an animal right now, okay, you would probably be thinking of a vertebrate, because those are the ones that are most familiar to us. Fish, dolphin, hamster, okay, whale, yes, tiger, okay, so on and so forth. Okay? So most of them that we're most familiar with are vertebrates, but most animals on Earth are invertebrates. Actually, we're going to look at some of the phyla of animals that are invertebrates, and some of these phyla are exclusive to the ocean. So they're only found in the ocean, and therefore we get to study them in marine biology, which is fabulous. Okay, so we're in chapter 8. These are the lower invertebrates in your book. Okay, so we get to start animals this cycle, which is very exciting. And in order to talk about animals, you need to know the characteristics of animals, and then I'll give you a full-on, straight-up definition. Okay. So here's your characteristics of an animal. They are heterotrophs. Right. That means that they cannot make their own food. They have to get their energy from some outside source. Okay. So it comes from another source. They are multicellular. That means that they are composed of more than one cell. So you cannot be considered to be an animal and just be a single cell. You have to be multicellular. You're also eukaryotic. So eukaryotic means that you have all of your DNA in a nucleus, and then you have membrane-bound organelles like mitochondria and Golgi apparatus and all of that stuff from freshman bio. All right? And difference between animals and plants, because plants are also eukaryotic, but animals do not have a cell wall around their cells. So plants have like cellulose, a hard cell wall that surrounds each of their cells. Animals don't have that. Okay, so you just got your cell membrane and that's it, no cell wall. Okay, animals also do internal digestion. So they eat stuff and then they digest the food inside of their body. So they do internal digestion. And in general, they move at some point in their life. All right? And then here's your definition of an animal: a multicellular eukaryotic heterotroph whose cells lack cell walls. And that's written in your notes for you. All right? And that applies to all of these animals that are on the screen that you can see. All right, so why do animals need to be multicellular? Well, the first reason is because if you're an animal, bigger is better. Okay? And it's better for a couple reasons. Number one, if you're bigger, it's hard to be eaten by things. So the blue whale is pretty large. Not many things can eat the blue whale. Okay, so once it dies, things can eat the blue whale. Okay, an orca could kill a baby blue whale. Yeah, but yeah, that's pretty much it. There's not many things that could eat a blue whale because it's so big. Also, if you are large, you have a lot of different options of things to eat, correct? Whereas if you're small, like the little copepod that you looked at under the microscope, if you're that small, really the only option for you to eat is all of the little phytoplankton. Okay, so hypothetically speaking, the blue whale could eat anything it wanted, right? Because it's big. Okay, so it has to be. So animals are multicellular to become larger. Well, why don't you see just like animals that are just one single cell but are giant single cells? Okay, well, the reason for that is because there's actually a size limit on cells. Okay, cells can only get up to a certain size, and the reason why they can only get up to a certain size is because of this thing called the surface area to volume ratio of the cell. Okay, do you know what surface area is? Geometry, yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah, length times width times height. Sorry, that's volume. Sorry, the length times the height. It's basically the area on the surface, right? So the amount of area that's on the surface of the cell. Okay. And then volume. Do you know what volume is? What? It's length times width times height, but it's the amount of space inside, right? Okay. So the ratio of the amount of surface area to the amount of volume, the space inside, actually affects how large cells can be. Okay, and let's look at 3 different cells that are different sizes and then talk about why that actually limits cell size. Okay, so you can see the differences in the surface area to volume ratio. So our first cell, okay, let's say is 1 centimeter. So we're going to say our cell is a cube. Okay, and so in order to find your volume of a cube, it's length times width times height, and it's 1 centimeter. So, and it's a cube, so each of them is 1 centimeter. So 1 times 1 times 1 is 1 centimeter cubed. So your volume, 1 centimeter cubed. Surface area is your length times height, 1 times 1 times 6, because you have 6 sides on a cube. Okay? So your surface area is 6 centimeters squared. You see that? So your ratio is 6 to 1. Okay, and that's good, and we'll talk about why. Cell number 2, so if you increase the size of a cell to 2 centimeters, okay, so you get 2 times 2 times 2, 8 centimeters cubed. Your surface area is 24, so your ratio is 3 to 1. You see that? Okay, and then if you increase it again to 3 centimeters, okay, you get 27 centimeters cubed, 54 centimeters squared, or 2 to 1 ratio. You see that? Okay, here's why this matters. Cells rely on diffusion in order to get oxygen and some nutrients and get rid of waste products like carbon dioxide. All right? And do you guys remember what diffusion is? Okay, water passing through cells, that is a specific kind of diffusion called osmosis. The movement of water cell molecules is osmosis. But diffusion is like the movement of pretty much everything else. So like, for example, if I sprayed a squirt of perfume at the front, okay, Alexis would be the first to smell it, okay? And then eventually the perfume molecules would spread out, and eventually Brandon at the back could smell it. Okay, so diffusion is the movement of molecules from high concentration to low concentration. Okay, so it spreads out. Okay, osmosis is specifically water. So cells rely on diffusion. So they rely on the fact that there's, you know, more oxygen outside of the cell than inside, so oxygen tends to move in. Right? Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. So here's what these ratios mean. So if you have a small cell, okay, for every 1 unit of volume that's on the inside of the cell, you have 6 units of surface area on the outside of the cell. That means that if you have like a waste product in here on the inside of the cell, okay, it's got 6 spots where it has the opportunity to diffuse out. Do you see that? Okay. If you have a large cell, okay, here's our big cell. For every 1 unit of volume, you've got 2 spots where that waste product, if it's in there, can diffuse out. Okay, you can kind of compare this to like trying to get the whole school out through 2 doors, right? Have everybody, you know, in one big mass say, okay, exit the building through these 2 doors. It's going to go slowly, right? It's not going to be very efficient, and it's going to get backed up, right? Whereas if you had like 6 doors that you could go through, it would happen much faster, right? and it would not back up as much. Yes? Okay, so that's like the same kind of idea with these cells. Okay, if they're smaller, you have a larger surface area to volume ratio, diffusion can happen much faster, and these cells are very efficient. Larger cells, not very efficient, and eventually if you get too large, this doesn't, like, the ratio is too small, and it doesn't work. The cell dies. You can't get rid of waste products or get oxygen fast enough. Does that make sense? So cells are small. They have to be small in order to be efficient. But, okay, so it's beneficial for an animal to be, or for a cell to be small. But the problem is that for animals, they want to be large, right? And so they solve that problem by having many cells, being multicellular. So they have lots of little cells that they put together to make a large animal. So animals are multicellular. Yeah. You're a bunch of cells, trillions and trillions of cells, lots of cells. So, yeah. Here's just a comparison between two animals. Okay, these are blob animals. Okay, so this is our blob animal that's multicellular, has lots of cells in it, and then this is our blob animal that's single celled. Okay, so if you compare the surface area to volume ratio here, organism B, okay, if you're to spread that cell out, okay, it would only have like a certain amount of surface area. It's got a fairly small surface area compared to the amount of volume inside. Whereas this one, okay, if you're to take each of these little cells and like spread them out and put all the surface area together, it'd have a much larger surface area, but the same volume as this one. So this one's much more efficient. Do you see that? Yes? Have I? Okay, reason number 2 why animals are multicellular, okay, is that the cells that make up the animal can specialize. Okay, so cells can specialize into different tissues or organ systems and make the whole organism more efficient. So think of it this way. Let's say I needed to do my job, okay, as your teacher, and then I was also responsible for being the President of the United States. I was also responsible for doing Mr. Woodcock's job. I was also responsible for doing my husband's job. Okay, if I tried to do all of those jobs, I would be not good at any of them, right? They're very inefficient. I couldn't ever get anything done. Okay, that would be bad. But if you specialize and you're an expert in one thing, right? I do my job as your teacher, President Obama is the president, Mr. Woodcock's the headmaster, and my husband does his job, then you're specialized, it runs much more efficiently, right? So in animals, okay, each of their cells specialize and do something and make the whole animal run much more efficiently, okay? It's called division of labor, so different specialized cells carry out different tasks in an animal, all right? And here's why that's actually an advantage to an animal. If you get a large group of animals or cells that grow together, they literally cannot function in the same way that a single cell can. Cells require a certain amount of surface area to get oxygen and get rid of waste. Okay, and so here's again our organism A that's multicellular, and then our single cell. So our organism here, these cells, in order to be able to get rid of their waste products and gain oxygen, need to be exposed to the environment, all right? And the environment being everything outside of the animal. So if you look at this cell right here, is that cell exposed to the environment? No, it's not. So this cell, if all of these cells in here were doing the same thing, this cell not exposed to the environment, okay, on the inside of the cell, our animal could not get rid of its waste products, could not get oxygen, and it would starve and die. Okay? But if you have cells that specialize, and some cells are responsible for bringing nutrients to the cells on the inside, then that will function much better. Okay? So a multicellular organism needs that specialization so that all the cells can survive. All right? Okay, so in multicellular organisms, in order to have efficient systems, you must have specialization of cells. Specialized cells are much more efficient at carrying out jobs. Okay, so in order for animals to survive, they need to be able to perform essential functions, which are things like reproduction and things like movement or responding to their environment. All of those things are essential functions for an animal. And we're going to look at different kinds of animals, and those special functions are carried out by the body's systems. Okay? So as we look at the different kinds of animals, we'll look at the systems that take care of each of these essential functions. So we'll look at what takes care of responding to the environment, like the nervous system, right? Or we'll look at what's responsible for picking up waste products, like the circulatory system, that sort of thing. Okay, so the body systems are used to carry out all of these essential functions that must be done in order for the animal to survive. So here's a little flow chart to help you see this. So all animals have eukaryotic cells that don't have cell walls. They all are heterotrophs, and they all carry out these essential functions like reproduction, circulation, feeding, excretion, response, respiration, and movement. I would write those 7 essential functions down as it is a homework question for you. All right. So movement, they move around. Respiration is breathing, like getting oxygen, getting rid of waste products like carbon dioxide. Response is responding to the environment. So if a ball flies at your face, you're going to move your head out of the way so it doesn't hit you in the face. Okay, that would be bad for your survival and your dashing good looks if a ball hit you in the face. Okay, excretion, getting rid of waste products. Feeding, I hope that's self-explanatory, getting energy. Circulation, moving oxygen and picking up to cells and picking up waste products, and then reproduction. So as we go through, we're going to look at these different systems, body systems that perform these essential functions, and you'll actually get like coloring pages for each phylum, and you're going to color it with a key, so all of the respiratory systems will be like blue, okay, and all of the digestive systems will be green. And so you can have that at the end to like compare all of the phyla together, okay? So that's what we're going to be doing. Here's the different phyla that we're going to talk about. So this cycle, we're going to talk about sponges, porifera. Cnidarians is next cycle. Okay, jellyfish, sea anemones, corals, all of that fun stuff. We're going to group the 3 worms into one cycle. Okay, so there's 3 worm phylas. We'll talk about them in one. Mollusks, okay, well, after worms, you'll have a test. Then mollusks, okay, is one cycle. Arthropods is another cycle. And echinoderms is another cycle. And then that's the end of the semester. Okay. Yep. You have 2 more tests. You'll have another test after echinoderms. Okay. But that's the end of the semester. As of right now, we're actually like halfway done with the semester. We have fewer than 14 cycles. And, well, I guess like half of 14. And we're pretty much through 7. So crazy. Okay. So as we look at these different animal phyla, we're going to look at some of the different features of the phyla. And one of the things that you may notice, we're going to start with what are considered to be the more simple animals. I use that in quotes because they're said to be simple, but I mean, they're not as simple as you would think they would be. Okay, so but what you'll notice is that as we move up from the simple animals to the more complex animals, you'll see that in the simpler animals, the life functions, all of the 7 essential life functions that we just talked about, those are carried out at the cell or tissue level. Okay, so sponges don't have tissues; they just have different kinds of cells, And all of the essential functions for that animal are carried out at the cellular level. Okay? Cnidarians have a tissue level of organization. So all of the essential functions are carried out in tissues. As we move up, the more and more complex animals will have organs and organ systems, okay, where those functions will be carried out. Okay, you'll also see bilateral and radial symmetry throughout the animal kingdom. So, do you guys know what symmetry is? Yeah. So if you divide something in half, they're mirror images of each other. So essentially, if you could divide your body in half down the midline, you could fold that half over onto the other half, and they'd be the same, right? That's symmetry. So you have two kinds of symmetry. You have radial symmetry, and you have bilateral symmetry. Bilateral symmetry is just one single way to divide the body in half. Okay, so you have bilateral symmetry. If you can only divide your body in half this way to have mirror images. Okay, if you divided your body in half like at your waist and you fold that over, is it the same? No. So bilateral. Okay, radial is different. Radial, you have many different ways to divide the body in half and get mirror images. Okay, so if you divide the sea star in half this way and fold that half over, do you have mirror images? Well, it is. Because if I held a mirror up to like on the midline of my body and I moved this part, like it would look like normal, okay? Because it's mirror image. So, like, it's a mirror image. Bring a full-length mirror and I'll hold it up and you can see. Okay? Because remember, mirror's opposite, right? Okay? So if I divide it this way, is it mirror images? Yeah. How about this way? Yes. Okay, anemones. Okay? Here, we'll redraw that. So this is my anemone. It's the mouth in the middle and the tentacles around the outside. Okay, we're looking at it from the top. If I divide it this way, is it mirror images? That way, that way, that way, that way, and that way, and that way, and that way. Okay. Yes. Record. Animals that have bilateral symmetry, okay, tend to have specialized sense organs in one part of their body, and there's only one way to divide their body in half to get mirror images. And they have specialized front and back ends, and then upper and lower sides, or right and left sides. Okay, so here's your butterfly. It's got bilateral symmetry. Okay, if you divided it this way, it would not be mirror images. Two more pictures to help you see it, and I think those are in your notes, right? Okay. Okay, and so because you have specialized right and left halves and upper and lower parts, we use directional terms with animals that have bilateral symmetry. So anterior is the front end towards the head, okay, posterior is towards the tail, dorsal's at the top, and ventral's at the bottom. Okay, so like the dorsal fin of a shark, it's the dorsal fin. It's because it's the fin that's on the dorsal side. It's like the iconic shark fin that cuts through the water, right? Jaws. Dun-dun. Dun-dun. Okay. Okay. Also, animals that are considered to be more complex have what's called cephalization, okay, which is a concentration of sense organs in a head region. And the reason for that is animals with bilateral symmetry tend to move head first through their world, through the environment. So it makes sense to have all of the sense organs on the head because that's where they can sense their environment. Okay. So cephalization, concentration of sense organs in the head. We'll also talk about ganglia. Okay, ganglia, some animals don't have any brains. They just will simply have what are called ganglia. And ganglia are gatherings of nerve cell bodies that can control certain parts of the body.